What if I told you there exists a book, ancient, veiled in myth and hidden from the masses, that claims to reveal exactly what happens the moment we take our final breath? Not in poetic metaphors, not in vague spiritual symbols, but in vivid step-by-step detail. A book that dares to cross the threshold between life and death and return with a map. Imagine this. Your heart beats its last and everything goes silent. But instead of oblivion, you find yourself standing in a realm more real than this one. Colors you've never seen, sounds that vibrate through your very soul, and a presence, familiar yet impossible to name, guiding you forward. Across cultures and centuries, seekers have whispered of this mysterious knowledge. Monks in Himalayan caves, Egyptian priests, Tibetan mystics, even early Christian Gnostics, they all spoke of a journey after death that was not chaotic, but ordered, structured, purposeful. A journey written in an ancient manual that was never meant for the unprepared. This video is not about speculation. It's not about near-death experiences or paranormal theory. It's about decoding a text so potent, so profound, that it was designed to be read aloud to the dying, guiding their soul through dimensions of light, shadow, judgment, and liberation. This is the mystery behind the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Bardo Thodol. But this is more than just a book. It is a mirror, a map, a prophecy, and it speaks not only of death, but of life, consciousness, karma, and rebirth. Long before modern science began poking at the edges of consciousness, long before psychology dared to name the unconscious mind, ancient civilizations had already mapped the terrain of death. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, or Bardo Thodol, is perhaps the most profound and daring of these maps. The name translates roughly to liberation through hearing in the intermediate state. But its deeper meaning, that death is not an end. It is a passage, a bardo, a between. To understand its power, we must first travel back, not just to ancient Tibet, but further into the very roots of esoteric thought. In the Himalayas, where the wind whispers through the peaks like the breath of forgotten gods, the great masters of Dzogchen and Mahayana Buddhism developed a stunning insight that consciousness is not produced by the brain. It only uses the brain while we rehear. In this view, death doesn't destroy the self. It simply unveils what was always behind the veil. According to these teachings, the Bardo Thodol was not written by any ordinary scholar. It was transcribed by the great Padmasambhava, a being so spiritually advanced that many consider him a second Buddha. His writings were hidden in the 8th century and only discovered centuries later by Karma Lingpa in a vision. That's right, the book was revealed, not composed. It is said to be a treasure text, terma, concealed until humanity was ready. But it wasn't alone in this message. The Egyptian Book of the Dead also offered incantations and maps for the afterlife. It described the weighing of the heart, the navigation of realms, the passage through divine gates. The Greeks, too, in the Orphic mysteries, whispered secrets of the underworld and instructed initiates on how to drink from the right spring to retain memory after death. Even early Christian mystics believed in the apokatastasis, the restoration of all souls, suggesting that the afterlife is a process, a purification, not a final judgment. What connects these traditions is not their mythology, but their structure. They all describe death as a journey, not chaotic but precise, not terrifying but transformative. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead goes further than any other. It outlines in poetic yet eerily specific language what you will see, feel, and confront in the moments after death. Here is the central idea. The state of your mind at death becomes the lens through which you experience the afterlife. In the first 49 days, known as the bardos, your consciousness passes through 3 stages: the moment of death, the experience of visions and deities, which are actually projections of your own mind, and the doorway to rebirth or liberation. And here was the twist. All of this is said to happen whether you believe it or not. This isn't about faith, it's about preparation. The Bardo Thodol was meant to be read to the dying. Why? Because the soul, even in its disembodied state, still hears. And what it hears, what it's reminded of, can liberate it. It's as if ancient Tibet was saying, the final test is open book, if you have the courage to read it. The Tibetan Book of the Dead doesn't speak in riddles, it speaks in revelations. It tells us that the moment of death is not a collapse, it is a revelation, a lifting of the veil, a sacred unveiling of what has always been within us, but hidden by the illusion of the physical world. This unveiling begins with the first bardo, called the Chikai bardo, the moment of dying. According to the ancient text, as soon as the physical body ceases to function, your mind does not fade, it expands. You are not unconscious, you are hyperconscious, but in a different realm. It is here that the clear light of ultimate reality appears. Pure awareness, limitless, radiant, boundless light. Not a blinding light in the physical sense, but a light of pure knowing, a return to the primordial awareness from which we all came. For a moment, just a moment, every soul experiences this clear light. It is your chance at instant liberation. The spiritual masters say that if your consciousness recognizes the light as your own true nature, you can dissolve into it and be freed from the cycle of rebirth forever. But here's the catch. Most of us miss it. Why? Because we're still clinging to identity. We say, where am I? What's happening? Why is everything disappearing? The ego panics. The habits of the mind pull us back. And so, unable to surrender to the light, we pass into the second bardo, Chonyid bardo, the bardo of luminous visions. Now the journey truly begins. In this bardo, you encounter gods, goddesses, wrathful deities, radiant Buddhas, peaceful forms, and terrifying ones. Some are beautiful, some are monstrous, but none are external. They are all projections of your own mind. Your thoughts, fears, attachments, hopes, traumas, materialized into divine form. Imagine being inside a dream where every emotion you've ever suppressed comes alive, with eyes, and speaks, and judges. That is the Chonyid bardo. But these are not meant to frighten you. In fact, they are opportunities. Each deity is a test, a mirror, a gatekeeper. If you can recognize them as aspects of your own consciousness, if you can stay calm in the presence of fear or recognize your desires without grasping, you can still attain liberation. The veil can still be pierced. However, if you become afraid, if you cling to the beautiful visions or flee from the terrifying ones, the mind descends further, from the world of light and subtle thought, to the dense fog of delusion and craving. Now you are nearing the third bardo, the bardo of becoming, or Sidpa bardo, the threshold of rebirth. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let us stay a moment longer in this middle ground, the Chonyid bardo, because it teaches one of the most profound truths ever whispered across time, that the afterlife is not a place you go. It's a world you create, instantaneously, with your mind. This is why the Tibetan masters trained relentlessly to still the mind, clear karmic imprints, and cultivate awareness. Because at death, the mind becomes your only compass. There is no body, no anchor, only you, and what you've carried with you all along. As the soul passes beyond the visionary realm of deities and illusions in the Chonyid bardo, it enters the third and final stage, the Sidpa bardo, the bardo of becoming. Here, the landscape changes again. The radiance fades, the deities dissolve, and what remains is an overwhelming pull, a magnetic force dragging the soul toward form, sensation, identity. The Sidpa bardo is the most relatable of the three stages because it mirrors the human condition: desire, fear, longing, confusion. All of these intensify. And here's the most mysterious part. According to the Bardo Thodol, at this point, you are no longer simply witnessing, you are choosing, but not consciously. Your next incarnation, your gender, your parents, your circumstances, these are determined by the energetic imprint of your mind at death. It's like a spiritual gravity. You don't pick your next life like items from a menu. You gravitate toward a situation that matches your unresolved karma. And that karma isn't moral punishment, it's energetic resonance. Let's use a metaphor. Imagine your consciousness as a musical instrument. The life you lived was the melody you played. When the body dies, the instrument still vibrates. And the next form your soul takes, will harmonize with the lingering vibration. This is why the Tibetan Book of the Dead emphasizes mental preparation above all else. Because in this bardo, a soul without awareness is like a feather in the wind, tossed about by invisible forces. But a soul with awareness can choose clarity over confusion, surrender over panic. The ancient text even describes a strange phenomenon. In the final moments before rebirth, the soul perceives two figures, a man and a woman. In most interpretations, these are symbolic of the sexual union of future parents. If the soul is overwhelmed by desire or aversion in that moment, it is drawn into conception, thus entering the cycle again. But, and here's the secret, they say that if you can recognize this scene as an illusion, if you can see it not with craving or disgust, but with awareness, you can transcend it, ascend. And what lies beyond rebirth? The book doesn't describe heaven as a location, nor does it warn of a literal hell. These are seen as states of consciousness. A being reborn into a hell realm may actually be experiencing a life filled with torment, addiction, violence, or despair, not in fire and brimstone, but in emotional, energetic suffering. Similarly, a God realm could be a life of luxury and ease, yet lacking awareness, thus trapping the soul in spiritual stagnation. In other words, the realms are right here, disguised as different lives, different experiences. The goal is not to get to heaven. The goal is liberation, freedom from compulsive rebirth. That's what the Tibetans call samsara, the wheel of suffering. And what is the key to that liberation? Recognition. Recognize the clear light as your essence, liberation. Recognize the deities as your mind, liberation. Recognize the craving for rebirth as illusion, liberation. Every stage is a test of awareness, and every failure simply means another chance, another life, another turn of the wheel. But here's the most haunting and hopeful truth of all. The journey described in the Tibetan Book of the Dead is not just about what happens after death. It is also a blueprint for awakening while still alive. Because these bardos, these stages, aren't exclusive to dying. They echo through every moment of deep meditation, trauma, loss, dream, or ego death. When you fall asleep, you pass through them. When you meditate, you flirt with them. When you awaken spiritually, you transcend them. And if you understand them now, you won't be a stranger to them later. If the Tibetan Book of the Dead is right, and death is not a termination but a transition, then our greatest spiritual work must begin before that final breath. The good news? We already walk through bardos every day, every ending, every heartbreak, every moment when life forces you to let go of control, ego, or identity. These are mini-deaths. These are rehearsals for the great passage, and how we respond to them reveals how prepared we truly are. So how can you begin preparing for this journey now? Not with fear, but with wisdom. Let's explore 3 practical, powerful ways to master the bardos while still in this body. 1. Practice awareness. Train your mind to recognize reality. The root of all liberation in the Bardo Thodol is recognition, recognizing the light, recognizing projections, recognizing illusions. So the first step is to train your mind to be still, awake, and unshaken. Begin a daily mindfulness or meditation practice, not for stress relief but for clarity. Sit in silence, watch your thoughts without attaching to them. Observe your emotions without becoming them. You are learning to hold your center when the winds of change blow. This is not about perfection, it's about presence, because in the bardos, presence is your compass. 2. Cultivate detachment. Release the anchors of ego and desire. Many souls miss the clear light simply because they're not ready to let go. They cling to identity, to unresolved emotions, to who they think they are. Now is the time to begin releasing those attachments, not through suppression, but through understanding. Reflect on what you fear losing: status, possessions, relationships, beliefs. Ask yourself, if all of this disappeared tomorrow, who would I be? The more you explore that question now, the less terrifying it becomes later. And when the time comes, you'll recognize the fear as illusion. You'll remember the truth of your essence, and you'll pass through. 3. read the Bardo Thodol to yourself, before it's needed. This might sound unusual, but the Tibetans were clear. The Bardo Thodol was meant to be read aloud to the dying. The soul, even in its disembodied state, hears, but there is no reason to wait. Read the text to yourself, especially the passages that describe the clear light and the bardos. Reflect on their meaning. Visualize the journey. Familiarize yourself with the terrain. When you make these words part of your mental landscape, they become like a lantern in the dark. Even if confusion arises at the moment of death, some part of you will remember. Dream work and lucid dreaming. Dreams are gateways. In fact, many Tibetan masters consider dream yoga, a form of lucid dreaming, as essential training for the afterlife. Why? Because the dream state mimics the bardos. Unstable, fluid, illusion-filled. If you can become lucid in a dream, you are training to become lucid in death. Keep a dream journal. Practice reality checks throughout the day. Before sleep, set the intention. Tonight, I will remember I am dreaming. If you can awaken in dreams, you are one step closer to awakening in the bardos. Above all, let this truth settle into your soul. You do not need to fear death. It is not a punishment, not a thief. It is a teacher, a portal, a return. Every act of awareness is a step toward liberation. Every moment of surrender is a rehearsal for transcendence. And every soul, yes, even yours, has the capacity to pass through the bardos with grace. If there is one message that echoes through the hidden pages of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it is this: you are not the body. You are not even the mind. You are awareness itself, eternal, radiant, and unbreakable. Death is not the enemy. For the awakened, death is a doorway. For the prepared, death is a mirror. And for the courageous, death is liberation. You've now seen how ancient masters didn't fear death. They studied it. They befriended it. They mapped it out like a sacred mountain, and then climbed it from within. We've explored how the Bardo Thodol outlines not just a theory, but a direct experience, a journey from the dissolution of the body to the blazing clarity of pure light through the realms of mind-born visions, and finally to the precipice of rebirth or release. You've learned that what you carry into death, your thoughts, emotions, attachments, shapes what you see after it. But perhaps most importantly, you've discovered that this is not merely a text for the dying. It is a manual for the living. So how will you live now? Will you begin to meditate not as an escape, but as a preparation? Will you release your grip on identity and begin to ask the deeper questions? Will you look at your fears and illusions with the eyes of a soul that already knows the path? Because in the end, it's not about believing in an afterlife. It's about remembering who you were before life began. That is the real mystery. That is the ancient truth. And that is the beginning of freedom. If this message stirred something within you, let it guide you, reflect, reread, meditate, because you are not here by accident. And when the time comes to cross the final threshold, you will not be alone. You will be ready. The map is now in your hands. Use it well. Subscribe for more revelations on hidden wisdom, sacred texts, and the spiritual techniques that awaken the soul. Until next time, walk gently between the worlds.